So voting against this offer won't stop the development, but certainly would bring a halt to future cooperation.
That was Geraint Jennings, and I'm Fiona Potney, news editor of Bailiwick Express. Next week, St Helier parishioners will be asked a £6.5 million question. Should they agree to sell a significant amount of land to the government to make way for the new hospital's controversial highway? That land includes the Inn on the Park car park, People's Park car park, Pearson Road and the much-discussed Jersey Bowling Club, which will have to move from its home of more than a century. It's a vote that has been a long time coming, but faced several roadblocks along the way. In February, parishioners blocked any sale of parish land until more details about the new access route up Westmount Road were provided. While a potential deal was being thrashed out, information about the road was slowly drip-fed, leaving some parishioners furious. Government officials had their request to only share the details with parish figures privately turned down, and it was only at a road committee meeting this week that full plans were finally provided to the public. The deal parishioners will be voting on next week goes much further than simply transferring land for cash. Some sweeteners have been thrown in too. The government says it will pay for a new home for the bowling club at Warwick Farm, it will create a new rainwater tank the parish can use under People's Park, that it will make up for anything lost, whether petanque courts or trees, and that it will foot the parish's legal bills. But taking the deal means accepting a potential loss too. More than 100 parking spaces could go. The problem is it's a take-it-or-leave-it deal. If parishioners don't like one element, it all falls through. So what next if that does happen? And if it does go ahead, what will the parish be splashing the cash on? I spoke with Procureur de Bien Public Geraint Jennings, who is responsible for looking after the parish's finances. He started by providing some background on the parish's negotiations with government.
Well, first of all, we wanted the right site for the hospital. And of course, we've been involved with the previous discussions over the two-site solution for Gloucester Street and Overdale, for two different applications for redevelopment at Gloucester Street, the changes which would have to be made in the surrounding roads, the parish roads, and of course we were especially keen to be able to preserve the public asset of residents and ratepayers of St Helier, and of course everyone who works and lives and enjoys St Helier as a place of People's Park for events, for open space, and to ensure that these assets were not sacrificed unnecessarily for a hospital. So the Overdale site was very much supported as an option, but there was always a question, even going back to the two-site solution, what about the access? And of course we were very concerned with proposals to put a road up through Valandre, land which had been ceded to the parish as part of the deal for the electricity station in Westmount Gardens, that we might have made a deal to gain some land after having lost some park and then lose that park in turn. So there was a feeling that there was a difficulty in preserving our open space and satisfying the needs of having a hospital. And obviously there was a desire to have the hospital handy for town, for St Helier residents, and to keep this sort of activity within the town, adding to the vibrancy, the economy, and St Helier as the hub of island life, whether in sickness or in health.
So when they started bit by bit revealing the plans to you for this access route via Westmount, what were the initial thoughts?
Well, it was very difficult to tell, because what so many people have been asking is, what is the nature of this road? What's the nature of the access? What's it going to look like? And quite often, many of the answers have been very technical in terms of engineering, which makes very little difference to most ordinary people's understanding of what a road will be like. They want to know about the width. They want to know about the impact on the visual area, what the access will be. And obviously with the proposed loss of the long-established bowling club in that location, potential impacts on heritage, the very familiar rocky outcrop, and the look of that particular place. People were very concerned with what it would be like rather than how it would be engineered. So that was one of the reasons why the Parish Assembly was so concerned to see visualisations and proper plans rather than technical and engineering explanations, and why the Parish Assembly voted not to permit the parish as municipality to engage positively with the government in terms of negotiations, in terms of allowing testing, which would be intrusive, but certainly some things could be done, outside those realms, in terms of exchanging information and in terms of looking at what is the value, what does the government actually want to acquire in the name of the public from the parish, what would the impact be, how would the government make good on any land it decided it needed and would take, and things like trees. So although we felt very bound by the Parish Assembly decisions, there were certain things we felt we had to do in terms of the oaths of office of a procureur to look after the public good, ensure the welfare, the legal status and the interests of the parish, its residents and ratepayers are properly taken into account. And the question was, were we prevented by the Parish Assembly decision from actually putting an offer received from the government to a Parish Assembly? And we decided that really, given the size of the offer and the ramifications of the changes, it would not be fitting for us to say, well, the Parish Assembly has voted against cooperation and therefore we have to reject this out of hand. No, we have to put it to a Parish Assembly so the Parish Assembly can decide whether to accept the government's offer.
At the time the deal was being put together, the government hadn't released its full access plans to the parish. It had previously refused to do so in public at a roads committee meeting, which the parish obviously objected to, and the government has only outlined them in full this morning. Was not having that information a barrier to getting together this deal?
What happened was the government eventually put in its planning application, so that in effect covered what the basis of their proposals would be, and that was in line with the various parcels of land and the various side, it's very important, but comparatively it's a side issue of relocating the bowling club and the necessary land swap or compensation which would accompany as part of the offer. And really in terms of what sort of landscaping the government wanted to do, which is comparatively minor, I think, but needed to be part of the deal. And the planning application needed to go in because I think we were quite clear we weren't going to go back to a parish assembly without having detail. And the government are very keen to get the offer before a parish assembly as soon as possible. But obviously, we have to be in possession of the detail. The planning application had to be in, and we have to allow enough time to be able to actually go through the formalities required to actually call a parish assembly on the particular topic, which is why it's penciled in for the 15th of December, because there's no way of actually legally calling a parish assembly without getting the paperwork out and the necessary notices out, and especially given the current pandemic situation, actually preparing for a large number of people assembling on a potentially heated issue. And with Christmas approaching, it was very tight. And we thought, well, we'll be criticised if we go too near Christmas, but if we don't give people enough time to be able to actually look at the planning application, for the roads committee to actually consider what the government is proposing technically, as well as how this fits in with the property it proposes to acquire from the parish and the various other issues, then it's a compromise in terms of timing and the amount of information we've been able to get out in advance. But I think I can honestly say, nobody can say that it could reasonably have been got out sooner than this, because we weren't going to go to a parish assembly without having a proper offer, which told the whole picture, and saying, there are things to be sorted out later, like the bowling club. We said that won't satisfy anyone.
Well, let's just talk about the bowling club quickly. That was obviously a big sticking point. That was a big talking point for everyone. So under this deal, there'll be a land swap. So the bowling club has been offered one of potentially 3 different spots around Warwick Farm.
It's a land swap in the first proposal. So the government will build a replacement facility for the Jersey Bowling Club, and they've penciled in 3 potential sites up at Warwick Farm. The bowling club has said it's happy. Well, it's not happy at having to move, but in the circumstances, it's satisfied that the replacement facility will be an acceptable replacement, and they'll be able to carry on their bowling activity and their club things in the new location. The parish wasn't intending to really go along with half a deal which wasn't acceptable to the bowling club. The government builds the new facility at Warwick Farm, and then that new bowling club is then transferred to the parish of St Helier as parish property in return for the parish transferring the current bowling club land to the government for the realignment of Westmount Road.
What happens if the bowling club decides it doesn't like any of the sites at Warwick Farm?
If the government is unable to deliver, say for planning application reasons, on the new facility at Warwick Farm, then there's a cash offer to the parish of St Helier and a cash offer to the Jersey Bowling Club. So the parish would be compensated for the loss of the existing site, and the Jersey Bowling Club would be compensated for the loss of their bowling facility, but they'd have to find another site and pay for it out of the proposed lump sum. But we are fairly confident that the government have found something which is acceptable, and the exact location within the government's already owned land may be tweaked, and the accesses for the club members may be tweaked, but in effect, as part of the deal, we think that's an acceptable swap. And if it's acceptable to the bowling club in terms of their activity, then the parish is satisfied. And the bowling club leases the existing property from the parish, and with the land swap there would be envisaged a new lease coming into effect to cover the new facility.
And why was it that we were told that Warwick Farm was on the table as an alternative site for the bowling club? Then there appeared to be the case that it wasn't on the table anymore, and then there was, as we've seen in this deal, that it's now the preferred site once more. Was that something that the parish was involved in, this kind of discussion? Was there an alternative preference on the table at another stage?
It was the government's responsibility to find an alternative site, either on government-owned land already or by acquiring an alternative site. And as we know with government sites, opinions vary, plans vary, and it has always been a difficulty with proposals. We'll compensate for the loss of Parish Park with some parkland elsewhere. And it's always been one of the critiques of this sort of attitude that if the government had appropriate land elsewhere to be building a hospital on, they'd be building a hospital on it. But they haven't had that land available, or they've earmarked it for other purposes, or it's not been suitable. So, why does the government need parish land? And so we've always been clear that we need full value for the parish land and not be fobbed off with a promise of some replacement park or replacement facilities somewhere else unidentified at some time in the future, whereby there would be a gap in provision of parkland, open space, the facilities. And obviously with the cash offer from the government on the table, the cash is only paid once contracts pass, once planning permission has been granted. And so obviously whilst construction is going, there will be some loss of park and access while building's going on, but we'll have cash in the bank to be able to invest at some point when there's decisions to be made in something of value to the parish, which will be of value to ratepayers, residents, voters, and hopefully everyone who uses St Helier as a hub of island life.
Currently, there are 157 parking spaces sitting on the land the government wants to purchase. Most of those are to Inn on the Park, Victoria Park and Pearson Road. But under the deal, the government's only replacing around a third of those, most of which being residential, which means around 100 will be lost for the public. Why has St Helier accepted this as a state of affairs?
It's partly because there's a strategy. There's a parking strategy. There's a transport strategy. The minister is supposedly explaining this. It all fits in. Quite how it fits in is unclear. But the government will be, in the short term, offering parking in lay-bys. But once the new hospital facility, or at least the new car parking up at the new hospital site, is in place, then places in Patriotic Street will be available to be reallocated. So in the short term, there will probably be a shortfall, but that would be the case wherever new facilities were being provided. There is a question over whether the government's analysis of what the demand is correct, because what may suit people in terms of parking, and especially with, say, white vans and these sort of vehicles which currently park alongside People's Park, whether those people will want to park in a lay-by on the front and then later in Patriotic Street. If there's a parking strategy from the minister coming, which is going to reallocate and explain how these things are going to be done, and if a lot of the parking which is currently being used for patients and staff at Patriotic Street actually moves up to the new hospital site at Overdale, there's things in the mix. But it is certainly, I think, uncomfortable as to the way the transition will go. But that will be a lot of the situation with the park and the access and the roads, because there's going to be construction, there's going to be road changes, and although things will be made good, trees will be replanted. Obviously, some trees will be lost in their current locations. Some trees may be moved, but it'll take several years for the vision of the new development to actually settle down.
Will St Helier be pushing for the full reinstatement of the parking spaces that are lost? So, as I say, that's around 100 once the process is complete. Obviously, there have been some vague commitments around bringing back some of them, but none of that's down in writing in the heads of terms.
If we had real confidence in the government's transport strategy, if there was any clarity as to how they were going to manage car parking, how the cycle routes were going to connect up, how the walking routes will be done, how the transport hierarchy is going to be sorted out, what is the future of a town bus service in terms of serving this, and what is the situation with this new multi-storey car park up at Overdale with a shuttle bus running. To what extent will this actually be in effect a park and ride? What are the policies which are going to be put in place to actually manage this? But this is the sort of situation where the government says, yeah, but we're developing transport strategy, transport is changing, and there are expectations as to what will happen, but there will be at least one large election between now and then, so quite a lot of the government's priorities in terms of car park usage may change, even if a new car park and new parking facilities are actually built.
One element of the deal that might perhaps sound unusual to people is leasing people's park to the government for £100 a year to build a rainwater tank. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, there's already a runoff surface water tank under people's park, and that was done in association with the residential development up in the quarry and up there to ensure that the surface water didn't run off, overwhelm the existing network. And in fact, the parish did an agreement to put in to allow a water tank to be put in under people's park. People won't notice it, but there is an access point, and it's much the same sort of deal that the parish can draw water. So say for watering parks, we don't need to use drinking water. We can use some of this surface runoff water free of charge, obviously, if in the process of taking the water out of the tank, we damage it, we have to make good. But otherwise, it's in there and does no harm. But it does, in the short term, mean a bit of digging up and relaying and building the tank. But it's been done before. There's one already there, and this will ensure a sustainable and environmentally friendly water supply for the parish, for its parks, and other purposes like washing down, or where we don't need drinking water, and it would be wasteful to use drinking water for these sorts of municipal purposes. So in fact, it's a good deal for the parish, and it's a lease situation. The government will have to install and maintain this tank, and it seems to us not to be problematic.
Was there anything that St Helier really wanted that didn't make its way into the deal?
I think it's really... I think the deal is difficult to place in a wider context. What the Roads Committee would have liked would have been clarity on the residents' access, not just for within the boundaries of the project. How are the cyclists going to get across town to access the bottom of Westmount Road for this new active transport corridor? How is the bus service going to fit in to provide a better public transport for the town area and the surroundings? How is the extra traffic of staff and patients going to affect the residents around there? In Tower Road, First Tower, La Route de Saint-Aubin. How is this really going to affect the Esplanade and other residential areas and developments being affected? How does this link up? I think that's really the, one can say that what's proposed is interestingly engineered, it may be well done, it may be necessary, but not seeing the bigger picture, the wider context, and how this development will benefit not just this area, but also the wider area, and how it fits into the government strategies is really, I think, what we haven't seen, and what has frustrated voters, ratepayers, residents, and everyone with an interest, because I think we've had a lot of talk about the clinical facilities, the treatment and all that within the hospital, and how this fits in with a health strategy, but how the physical changes and how the different accesses and the changes and disruption in the parks, how that fits into the wider picture, I think is something where, obviously the experts and the consultants have been focusing on the job they've been given, and we haven't had from the government, the wider vision and, something to really enthuse us, to go along with something which hopefully will give us benefits, even though it's disruptive and annoying and we have some losses in the short term.
Turning to the deal itself, do you think it's a good deal as it stands?
In terms of value for what the government is offering in return for taking this property from the parish, this land, it represents fair value. I have no hesitation in saying that it's a fair valuation. It's realistic. If we were selling the land, one could say, well, this bit perhaps a few thousand less, this bit perhaps a few thousand more, but the overall package, and it is one package, taken as a whole, it offers fair value in terms of the cash value. The government is offering to pay the parishes reasonable costs, so professional costs in terms of any valuation or the legal costs to get the contract through. The government is offering to pay that. So it doesn't matter how complicated the contracts are to get this deal through, the parish won't pay it. The government will pay it under this deal. Also, where the government takes a bit of park or a bit of land, it has to reinstate landscaping paths the other side and reroute the paths because they're no longer going. They'll be going into a brick wall, as it were, or into a bank, not into an extra area. Petanque pitches will have to be re-provided to the satisfaction of the parish. We get a lot of, as it were, extras sorted out with this to enable the deal to go smoothly from the government's point of view and from the parish's point of view, without us having to say, well, there's extra expense involved in getting this bit through.
So you're killing a lot of birds with one stone.
It is a comprehensive package.
And what happens if the deal doesn't pass?
Whether the parish assembly wants to agree with it in terms of do they like it, then one can say, well, the government has compulsory purchase powers and they can go ahead and exercise these compulsory purchase powers. And although the states have put some conditions in terms of replacement facilities, there isn't that sort of or almost goodwill, sewn into the offer in terms of this will be done in cooperation with the parish. If the government exercises its compulsory purchase powers, which it could do at any point, even after having voted the deal, it could decide it's just too difficult with legal matters. It'll be easier just to vest the property once planning permission has been given in the public of the island through compulsory purchase powers. Then we don't. The offer is off the table, and we don't get some of the other things which enable the deal to go through smoothly. So voting against this offer won't stop the development, but certainly would bring a halt to future cooperation, because if the offer is accepted, then the parish will be cooperating on the re-provision and the re-landscaping and all these other things. If the offer is rejected, of course, then the government will not have to cooperate in the same way as it has offered to under the terms of this deal. And also, of course, the compulsory purchase would then involve an arbitration as to the value of the land. Now, so far, both sides have agreed that this is a fair value, but the government would take that offer off the table and would probably argue that under the circumstances of compulsory purchase, it would like a lower valuation of the various areas of the land taken separately or together, and the parish would have to argue, in fact, that what the government offered was fair value when we agreed it, and its fair value at arbitration.
And does the parish have any other tools in its armoury that it can use at that stage to try and ensure that it gets the best possible deal for itself?
It's independent arbitration, so we'd have to employ professional surveyors and legal opinion in order to go through the arbitration process. So we'd be spending money even if we sort of got the same compensation as is on offer from the government with the offer that is proposed. Of course, under arbitration, the arbitration could say, actually, the value is more. We don't think so. Technically, it's possible, but we don't think it's worth rejecting this offer in the hope that arbitration would eventually decide that there was a slightly higher valuation on the property if and when it was compulsorily purchased.
So just to be clear, obviously St Helier got it in its own valuers to look at all of the land and come up with valuations. Do the proposals that the government has put forward match those valuations that St Helier wanted?
I think it's fair to say that over the overall package, if you add up all the little bits and the bigger bits together, and there's a question about what is the value of a small bit of sort of rocky headland or scrubby slope, in isolation, is there a value together? What's the value of the whole thing? And then taking into account what it would take to acquire a similar amount of value. To what extent is it just the value of the land because it's undeveloped or undevelopable because it's a near vertical bit of slope, or it's just open space, a bit of open space. But a bit of open space can be very valuable to families, to residents, even if you can't build on it, even if you don't build on it. And to what extent could one build on it? Or could one provide car parking in the event if one got planning permission? What would be the value? So there's plenty of things about what the likely value of this is as it stands, or what it could be in the future, and also what is the loss of the amenity in terms of parking or access. It's a matter of sort of professionally judging what it would be on the open market if there was a willing buyer, and there are very few buyers for sort of random bits of bushy, scrubby edge of parkland or bits of slope, but the government is the willing buyer. We have to say, we have to get what we believe is the true value for this. We think that this is fair and reasonable. One could hope for a little bit more, one might fear a little bit less, but we think this is a realistic and fair value, which is why we're agreeing to put it to a parish assembly. Because if we didn't think it was a fair value, then we would say so.
And if the deal goes ahead, what might that money enable the parish to do?
What we're deliberately doing is not putting this, because we're not getting the money immediately. It's only if and when the government gets planning permission for the hospital development will contracts be passed and the money will be paid over. In the light of the development, we might think, because there'll be a slight effect on the children's playground as it exists at People's Park, so we've got time to think about children's facilities, putting children first, whether it's sporting facilities, whether it's open space, whether it's leisure, cultural, whether it's access, of course, walking, cycling, facilities, bus stops, urban parks, country parks, or do we look for social facilities in terms of investing this at a later date in facilities for sheltered housing or any of the other sort of projects which we've considered or looked at or been involved with in the past, or things which are ongoing. So we don't need to rush into things, but certainly it's not an excuse for a splurge. It's for sitting down, thinking, and of course it's only if this is voted, it's only if the hospital goes ahead with its planning permission, and we'll take a sober and serious thing of what would be the best usage for this in the light of what we've had to give up and what people have felt strongly about in terms of loss of trees, open space, access, visual amenity, and take that into account. But it will be up to a future parish assembly to decide how to allocate parish funds.
Geraint Jennings, thank you. The crucial parish assembly vote is taking place next Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the town hall, and you can follow bailiwickexpress.com and Express's social channels for all the latest updates. If you've any strong views about the proposed deal that you want to get off your chest ahead of that, you can email editor@bailiwickexpress.com. If you found this podcast interesting, please do share it. The title track was I Shift My Weight by Luno. More next week from me, Fiona Potney, and the Bailiwick Express team.